Hello, everyone, and welcome to our weekly Power Lounge. This is your place to hear authentic conversations from those who have power to share. My name is Amy Vaughn, and I am the owner and Chief Empowerment Officer of Together Digital, a diverse and collaborative community of women in digital who choose to share their knowledge, power, and connections. You can join the movement at togetherindigital.com. And today we are going to dive deep into the heart of what makes a workplace truly thrive. And no, we're not just talking about free snacks and work from home Fridays. We are talking about exploring the powerful forces of intrinsic motivation and the psychology behind optimal performance. Our guest today is a true expert on employee engagement with over 3 decades of experience in attraction and recognition and our retention and recognition. Kelly McCullum is the founder of Stay and a whiz at cracking the code of workplace culture. Her tell it like it is approach has transformed organizations across North America to employee magnets. So whether you're a creative director looking to spark innovation for your design team, a digital marketing manager aiming to boost productivity in your always on environment, or a tech leader striving to cultivate a more inclusive and more motivated development team, you're in the right place. I know this has been a big topic of conversation as we're all kind of sitting in this weird world of hybrid remote work as well. I hope you're all ready to challenge your assumptions, gain some actionable insights, and walk away with some tools to create a workplace where people don't just show up, but show up excited and ready to excel. Remember, live listeners, we know that you're here with us, and we love to have you here with us to be able to make your comments in the chat, ask your questions, share any of your experiences and enthusiasm. So please don't hold back. We love to hear from you. Everyone, please welcome our expert and guest today, Kelly McCullum. And let's dive into the powering performance and workplace motivation. Welcome, Kelly.
Hey, thanks, Amy, for having me. I really appreciate it. I know it's been a long time in the working, so great to finally get together and have the chat.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, very much agree. This is an important topic. You know, I realize we talk a lot about digital marketing and advertising, but a lot of us within this community are team and group leaders, and we have to do a lot to work and motivate the people that are around us. And again, as our work environments have been changing and evolving over the last few years, you know, this stuff, it kind of just seems to get harder rather than easier. But I want to take a step back for a moment, and I want to start at the beginning, specifically your beginning, Kelly. And I want to kind of let our listeners know how you first got interested in employee engagement and what was your journey to founding your company, Stay.
Yeah. Well, I'll get to that in 1 second. I just want to affirm something you said. Management is hard. Yeah. Management is hard. It's always been hard, and it's not getting any easier. The circumstances we see ourselves in the realities of 2024, it's not getting easier to be a manager. So I think the first thing I want to say to anybody who's in a leadership position is cut yourself some slack, right? Because it's a demanding job. You're being asked to do 50 different things, and you have a life outside of that. So,
absolutely.
I'll start with that. And about me, so employee engagement, I'd never heard of employee engagement until, sometime in the 2000s. So, back in the early 90s when I started working, we didn't talk about things like engagement or culture. We just knew if we liked our jobs or hated our jobs, right? And I'd do my part early in my career. I'd volunteer on social committees and try and plan great parties and golf tournaments. And that was kind of what culture was at the time, bringing a little bit of fun to work. And so it wasn't until I landed a job as a project manager with an employee engagement survey company that I started to be able to put some pieces around what is this thing that makes us like our work and hate our work. And they introduced the concept of employee engagement. And probably you all know what an engagement is, but I'll tell you because I didn't know. And it's basically the emotional connection that we have to our work. It's different than satisfaction. You can be satisfied with your work. You can be making a lot of money and have a great pension, but absolutely hate the work that you're doing. That satisfaction is different. Engagement's I am inspired to come to work. I love what I'm doing. I'm putting in the extra effort because I want to. And so this organization did surveys, and we did hundreds of surveys. We did onboarding surveys, we did exit surveys, we did engagement surveys, we did pulse surveys. And I moved through the organization through different roles, and in the end ended up becoming a consultant because it was really interesting to see how these same factors all had some part to play in whether we enjoy our work or not.
Mm-hmm.
And despite the fact that there's consistencies like leadership and work-life balance and all of these things, every culture is very nuanced. So you can't just say go fix your leadership stuff. Like there's specific stuff around leadership in a culture that needs to be fixed. So it's been interesting. Like it was a really interesting time there. And when I left, I basically just put that lens on everything I did. I was a leader for a little while, and I thought, oh, let's test everything I learned as a leader to see if it works. And sure enough, you apply all the principles you learn, and we had a great turnaround on a digital team. I worked as a software delivery manager, and I'm not technical at all, so that's pretty sad. But it showed that I didn't have to be technical, because if you pull out the right leadership skills, you can inspire and motivate your people. So, so it's become a part of who I am. I did end up in a layoff last June. I was working for a Crown corporation who had a layoff. And so it was a bit of a time for self-reflection, like, what do I want to do with my life? I'm getting a little bit older. Should I consider this entrepreneur track? I kind of had my foot in two piles. Do I want to get a job, or do I want to do my own company? And so I launched Stay. And Stay is all about the whole concept of Stay is about retaining your talent. Like, what do you have to do to inspire your talent so you can keep them? And it's not just about keeping them, because you don't want to keep uninspired people.
Right.
Like
you want to keep the right people.
And if they're not inspired, why are they not inspired? Is it them, or is it the organization? What's going on there, right? So, so Stay exists to help organizations basically figure that stuff out. And so I really enjoy helping organizations dig deep to figure out what's going on within their cultures.
That's fantastic. I love that so much. I think it's such an important thing. I think because throughout, I think the course of the last 6 or 7 years, especially, there's just been so much disruption within our own day-to-day lives that workplace cultures, it's where work is where we spend the majority of our time throughout the week, right? And sometimes it's like that is where we want and need stability. However, if we're coming to a place that we aren't finding inspiration, or we have a ton of turnover, all of a sudden that's just one more factor into disruption, which then leads into a lack of production, and a number of other things that I'm sure we'll get into here soon. But it's such an important work that we're doing right now, or that you're doing, to what we're seeing out there in the workforce right now. So I'm kind of curious, in all of the years of experience that you've had doing this, what is the most significant shift that you've seen in workplace motivation, especially in fast-paced industry? So, in our community, Together Digital, it's a lot of women in tech and advertising, which are very kind of high-pressured, 60, sometimes 70 hours a week jobs.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny thinking back. She was like, in your 30 years, if I go back 30 years, like, marketing wasn't a thing. FANG wasn't a thing. STEM, we didn't talk about that. Tech wasn't a thing when I started working. Like there's going to be a lot of, when I was growing up, there's a lot of that happening, because it's a different world. Like, it's absolutely insane how much things have changed since I started working in 1992. I was really excited because my first job was with an NHL team. And I just thought that was like if FANG was cool back then, that was cool, right? Yeah. So I love that. It was a great first opportunity. But like, one thing, like, there's a lot of things that have changed. But I think when it comes to motivation, the biggest shift I've seen is the flip from focusing on extrinsic motivation. So things like money, promotions, like those tangible carrots. I guess Dan Pink, if you've read his book Drive, he talks about carrots and sticks. Like extrinsic motivators, carrots and sticks, right? And that was the only focus back in the day, if you will. And over the years, and more and more and more, we're hearing a lot more about intrinsic motivation. And intrinsic motivation it all comes from within us. And again, if I can quote Dan Pink, things like autonomy, mastery, purpose, sense of belonging, These are the things that really make people connect to their work. And people long to connect to something. This is
Yes.
why you see people who play video games for 15 hours a day.
Yeah.
They just want to get better and better at it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or, why do you take up an instrument? Or people who contribute to Wikipedia, like, why are you giving them your free mind share? It's because you want to be part of something bigger. So it's a huge shift. It's completely different than how
It
it was.
is.
Like when I first started working, it was a very command and control. You do your work, you listen to your manager. Flexibility meant you could
Yep.
start 5 minutes late. Like there was
Yeah.
no flexibility, right? It's just, so seeing this shift and seeing this shift in motivation has been like super inspiring for me. It's really interesting to see how much things have changed. I'm super curious to see how things change in the next 20 years.
Yeah, I very much agree. And I think you almost see that dichotomy even playing out within companies, corporations, and then within like leadership teams and like incoming talent, oftentimes, because they think they've got whatever they've got in spades, but they don't realize like they're dangling the wrong carrot. And I do. David Pink is great, great
And
author,
I think
great
like
books, good
the
recommendation
only
there.
exception, the only exception to intrinsic motivator, I think, are salespeople. So I think
Yeah,
salespeople are genuinely driven by money.
wired a little different there.
Yeah, they're like a
But
different.
even so, I think, but even so, some of the best salespeople I think out there are the ones that do truly believe in what they're selling. It's
Yes.
not just about like gaming and making the most and winning the most. I mean, that is a part of it. But at the end of the day, the
There's
ones that
mastery,
even
right?
excel, right?
Yeah,
The ones that
mastery is
excel
the
even
key,
more,
right? Like even in sales, even though it's money, 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 it's not. Is it
right?
money, or is it I'm better than everybody else and I'm winning and I'm, there's
Right.
still more going on.
There's a
You're
little
right.
bit something deeper there. Absolutely, absolutely. Now, these are all great points, and I agree. I think it's there's got to be this kind of reckoning or a little bit of a level setting, or companies understanding that those intrinsic motivators and how important they actually are, but then also realizing it's like it's not just achieved with a happy hour.
Well, and it's also like understanding like people I hate the word soft skills and EQ and all of this talk about that like as a shrewd business person,
Uh huh.
even if you don't give a crap about your people, like let's
Yeah.
say you are just a narcissistic individual who only wants their own success.
Yeah.
You need to care about your people because if you build
Hmm.
into your people and you inspire your people, that is when your business is going to be successful. It's
Hmm.
so even for those who aren't like I hate thinking that way, but you know what?
Yeah.
17% of CEOs are narcissists. So call it like it is.
Interesting.
5% of the population narcissists, 17% of CEOs. So
I don't know why I was laughing. I shouldn't be surprised.
you got to talk to their business sense. And
Yeah.
so it does make strong, it's good human thing to do, but it also makes really good business sense to care about inspiring your people. They will drive business results.
Mm, that's interesting. I love that. Well, again, you pulled it out. You started it. So like the whole data, I love data. And so how I'm curious, you said 17% of CEOs are narcissists, 5% of the population are. It's like, okay, how has your approach to data driven decision making evolved you over the last 12 years in HR and culture? Like these kinds of insights, I think are actually really important, right? To bringing certain things to light to help people understand.
Oh, I
How else
love
would you
data.
build upon that?
Love data. Data is like I have been interested in data for as long as I can remember.
Yeah.
It's factual, it's
Yep.
objective, you can trust it. When I was in my early days, I studied marketing. I couldn't do digital marketing now because I don't have a single digital marketing skill. But back in the day,
Yeah.
it was more about market research and human
Mm-hmm.
behavior. So I did a lot of surveying. I mean, I
Yep.
remember doing a study with one of the banks about whether people like their cafeteria food. I
Yeah.
mean, it was early surveying, but it exposed me early to like the voice of people and how strong and how important it is to listen to the voice of your people.
Yes.
And
Mm-hmm.
so as long as I can remember, that's been an interest. And so it evolved over the years. I think talked to you about social committees. So we do little
Yeah.
surveys with social committees. Like, oh, what kind of event would you prefer? Would you like a boat cruise? Would you like a Christmas party? Would you like a golf tournament? You do those simple surveys. And then I remember evolving a little bit and maturing my surveys a little bit. And then when I actually got to the engagement shop, I learned like that you could actually use data to measure motivation. And it's not something I would have considered. But if you play into the human psychology and what drives human behavior and the research lens, it actually was a really perfect fit that I just didn't see when I was in school. right? So I think as it's evolved, so in the engagement shop, I learned about the surveys and the data, and that was important, and it inspired me to understand just what the different factors are that impact employee experience and employee engagement. But as I've evolved, I've probably implemented a lot more qualitative data.
Yeah.
So, like, I still think surveys are amazing. I think you need them. I think you got to be careful with them. If you don't action them, people get really mad. People talk about survey fatigue, but there's no such thing as survey fatigue. It's a
Yeah.
lack of action fatigue. You can ask me every day for my opinion. If you action my opinion, I'm
Yes.
going to keep giving you my feedback. People are going to stop giving you their feedback
Yes.
if you don't do anything with it. So,
Exactly. What's the point
so
if you're not going to listen? Good
right.
point.
So from the data queen, I'm telling you right now, if you're not going to action whatever it is you're asking, just don't. Just
Yes.
don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
But then you've got like the power of interviews and focus groups, and that became really interesting. So I started doing a lot more of that. And I
Mm-hmm.
think at this point in my life, I think I've done probably over 1,500 stay interviews, exit interviews, and it's like just so fascinating when you talk to people.
Mm-hmm.
People always like, how do you get people to talk? I'm like, well, just ask them questions.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
actually not that hard. If you show a genuine interest, like people
Mm-hmm.
know if you're genuine. So
Yeah.
if you're, you've got your paper and you're reading your questions and you're making notes and you're not engaged, like people are not going to give you the real them. So there's
Right.
got to always be this sort of genuine interest. And I am a curious person. I ask why, I ask the next why, I ask the next why. And I find when you do that, it doesn't actually put
Yes.
people on the spot because if you're
Uh-huh.
engaged, like they actually want to talk. And when people start
Yes.
sharing their lived experiences, it's not like, oh, no one ever pays attention to my work. It's like, well,
Mm-hmm.
what makes you say that? Well, when I did this project for my boss, I didn't get any feedback. Oh, what
Yeah.
kind of feedback would you have liked? Right. So the deeper you dig, the more
Love
you
it.
get to know what the real root of these problems are. And then you can sort
Mm-hmm.
of theme the qualitative themes, combine them with the data, and you've got a really good picture of what you need to do to improve,
Mm-hmm.
workplace, make it a good workplace. Right.
I love it. I love it. I think that's so important too. I think it's one of those things, surveying feels like such a great blanketed way to reach so many people, but how many companies don't sit down and talk to until it's exit interview time to
Mm-hmm.
people and do what you just said there, which is ask why and then ask why again and ask why again or what. You just
Yeah.
kind of ask the one question and take the answer for what it is and you don't go deeper. I love that advice. That's great. That's fantastic. Oh, such good stuff. And I love that idea of data to measure motivation. That's another rabbit hole I could go down, but for the sake of time. And live listening audience, don't forget, you can always ask questions too. But that's definitely got me curious. Let's see. We often hear about the importance of company culture. Obviously, we know it's important. In your view, what is the relationship between culture and motivation? And I would want to ask this from the lens of particularly for women in male dominated fields, because I think when we're asking this as ladies, deep down, we kind of know why we're asking this.
Yeah. I mean, I think, culture means different things to different people.
Hmm.
So when I talk about culture, it's the way we do things, right? It's the way people naturally do things. So, we have cultures within our cities, we have cultures within our homes, we have cultures within our churches, and we have cultures within our organizations. And sometimes organizations are very intentional about culture and sometimes they're not. It doesn't mean they don't have a
Mm,
culture, right?
yeah.
So you pick up the way people do things. A good example, like in culture can change overnight too. Like
Yeah.
think about Elon Musk taking over Twitter, right?
Yep.
Like I didn't think it was possible to screw up an
Great
organization
case
and people
study.
that fast, but guess what? You can, right? So
Hmm.
culture is the collective, like what you're seeing going on around you, and it influences you. It can motivate you. It can demoralize you. So why is that important for women or any diverse,
Yes, exactly.
populations? Like
Yep.
if you think of we have an inclusive culture, if we have an inclusive culture, when you look at senior leadership, you see Black women. So
Yep.
if you're an employee in a company where you see Black women in leadership, you think, huh, maybe I can be a Black woman in
Yes.
leadership, and it inspires. On the other hand, if all you see are middle-aged white men across the entire organization, and you're a person of color or a woman or
Mm-hmm.
a young person or neurodivergent or whatever, whatever
Right.
your difference is, that's going to be demoralizing because you're going to think, I
Yes.
don't fit in here,
Yep.
right? So this is where the concept of inclusive cultures are really important. Cultures that can empower a personal sense of accomplishment are also very powerful, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's for anybody, but
Yep.
I think specifically for women, like in male, like STEM, science, tech,
Yeah.
engineering, math, like it's hard to find women interested in, like, I don't know why it is, but women just don't go into those trades as much. Is it because they
Yeah.
see that people aren't in those trades? Like as a young kid, you don't see a bunch
Part
of
of
people
it.
say, like you're just is it influence? Is it nature? Is it nurture? I don't know what the answer is to that,
Right.
but I feel like if we saw more representation,
Mm-hmm.
we might actually see more women go into like sciences and engineering, right?
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. There is absolutely something to the see it, be it factor.
Mm.
But I think what's absolutely key, excuse me, wee moment there. What is absolutely key to what you just said there, Kelly, though, is, and I don't know if it's everybody expected that answer or not, or they were really noticing it as much as maybe I did in the moment. But when I said, how would you define culture? You said, the way you do things. You didn't say your mission or your talk, the way you talk, your voice. You didn't say the words on your walls. All that bullshit that they put up to say like this is who we are, this is who we do, who we are and what we do. It's not the talk, it's the walk. It's the systems that you put into place to create a space for inclusion. So if
Well,
you say you're inclusive, then you create inclusion by executing it, not by saying it.
yeah, yeah. If you need to put it on the walls, it's because you've forgotten what you're supposed to be doing, and that's a problem.
Agreed, agreed, agreed. I love that so much. I love your definition is spot on. It is absolutely the way you do things. And it goes down to all of your processes, from
Every
onboarding to people exiting to just like even your day-to-day stuff. And it's like how often have you really looked at your what you think is your culture and then said, okay, well, if this is our desired culture and this is the way we're doing things, how are those things matching up?
it's interesting you say that. Like I get really frustrated with values exercises. I think they're really important if you
Yeah.
actually use them the
Live
right
them.
way. But like
Right.
you've got, like all these organizations that seem to pick from 30 or 40 words and their
Yeah.
one word values integrity. It's like,
Yeah.
really? That's your value. Integrity.
Yeah.
You've got to tell people that like really that's not like a baseline expectation. You have to promote integrity. But and
Right.
customer is the one that gets me the most, right? Because like customer focus is like obviously super important. But I
Yeah.
worked for an organization that said that they were customer focused, but they had like if you were a customer calling in, there was like 15 different systems that you would have to
Mm-hmm.
figure out what you were doing. Like it was not a good customer experience. So to be
Yep.
calling yourself customer focused was kind
Mm-hmm.
of like a load of crap. But
Yep.
then you look at an organization like Zappos, and I love Zappos
Yeah.
because they are textbook, that's what you do for culture. Like you live your values. And for them,
Yes.
customer focus. They called it like delivering wow service. And I
Mm-hmm.
haven't. It's like they don't sell into Canada anymore, probably because they can't deliver wow service would be my guess. But when they did deliver
Ah.
into Canada, I remember calling them. I ordered a pair of shoes online.
Mm-hmm.
It came in. I got the wrong size, and I should have known better. I knew I was a 6.5. I bought the 6. It was stupid me anyway. So I called them, and on the first ring, somebody answers. They're like, "Okay." All of a sudden, that's weird, right?
Oh.
I tell them about my little situation, and they said, "Well, what size do you need?" Oh, well.
Mm-hmm.
So they send me the shoes, and they say, "When you get a minute, send the other ones back, right? Like, we'll send you postage thing so you can like don't have to
Yeah.
worry about the shipping charges." I was like, wow. And I did. So I said, wow. And I'm like, oh, they did it. That's exactly like I love that. And I love the story
It's so
about how
great.
good they are at what they do. And I use that when I
Exactly.
talk to organizations about their values. I'm like,
Yeah.
don't make it a value if it's not really a value. And then people talk about aspirational values. I hate like if you're not doing it, it's not part of your culture.
Right.
So like I don't know.
No.
It's
No.
it's and I can understand cultures wanting to evolve and change into better things, but I think you kind of can't claim it until you are it. right?
I agree. I agree. Yeah, you've got to be making the strides and doing the things before. Yeah, I agree. I agree
Yeah.
wholeheartedly. So much, hence getting all choked up. I was like, I'm going to get on a soapbox. I feel this all so much because I think it is a great, just cautionary tale for those who are on the job seeker market right now, especially for those who are in those marginalized spaces that don't feel always comfortable seen, heard, and valued, and are extra cautious when they're looking because they want to walk into spaces where they just aren't going to fall into those kinds of traps, and they want to work for the kinds of companies that they are aligned to because, as we're talking about intrinsic motivation, that's what people are wanting. So yeah, we're talking about not just retention, but for recruitment, and people can see through that. They've got that BS meter on. And just because you have those words on the walls, guys, it's not going to necessarily pan out if you're not living them out. So if you're going to put them on the walls, you better really actually be living them.
Yeah. People
And
can
better
smell it,
yet,
right?
so
Like people know when people are being disingenuous. Like, don't
yes,
try and fool your people, right? They're too
right.
smart for that.
And then honestly, at the end of the day, too, it's like I think people are smart enough nowadays too. It's like you don't even put them on the walls. Like I should just be able to walk in and feel it and see it and look around the room and know ahead of time. Like you even said, like I mean, I know Zappos kind of puts it out there, but like the fact that you even stated it without even realizing it is so funny. It's like spot
And I
on.
didn't
That's
know that about them at the time. Like I
mm-hmm,
read about like that was like years, like, probably before I even knew much about
perfect.
engagement. And
See,
then when I discovered all these things about culture, I'm like, oh, isn't that
uh-huh.
cool? I remember these guys. Like
Just a
they
great
did. They made me go,
example.
wow, love it.
Yep, it's all in the execution. It sounds silly, and I feel like it's something that companies still make that mistake of just thinking it's like this very top of the funnel or top of the leadership type of exercise, and somehow it'll just trickle down. It's like, no, you got to drill all the way down. Get into the weeds with that. All right, let's get into this whole aspect of working remote and hybrid, because I mentioned that earlier in the intro as well. It's another thing that a lot of us are kind of working through and dealing with as leaders right now. How does this new work landscape impact motivation, and what strategies have you seen work well? Because there are some out there that I hear about that I'm like, oh God, hallelujah. I don't work. I mean, I work for myself, so obviously I'm not going to be. I'm holding up my mouse. Nobody can see that's on listening to the podcast, but like I've heard there's mouse trackers to track how often you have moved your mouse.
Yeah, I mean that's just there's no trust there, right? Like, well, the remote thing work is killing me, right? So I thought like COVID pushed workforce, the future of work, it pushed it forward like 20 years in like overnight. It was
Yeah.
crazy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like nobody was working, very few people were
Yeah.
working remotely pre-COVID. And
Mm-hmm.
then we discovered really quickly that we could. And then
Yeah.
people started to really like it for lots
Mm-hmm.
of different reasons, right? I'm a huge fan of remote work. Besides the time savings, my commute used to be 90 minutes each way.
Ooh,
That's an hour and a half a day. Like
that's a lot.
well, that's a lot of time to get back into your day. It saves you oodles of cash. And right now,
Mm-hmm.
the economy's scary. So, I mean,
Yep.
every penny you can put back in your pocket, that's important. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's an amazing equalizer for working parents, specifically women, because we know, despite the fact that men have started to pick up their socks a little bit,
Yeah.
the caregiving still primarily
On
falls on
us.
the woman. So remote work equalizes, like it really levels the playing field, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's great for the environment. It's great for flexibility, and I believe flexibility is the future of work. And for employers, it gives
Agreed.
them their pick of talent. So to me, like remote work is like the second coming, right? I love it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I think when you tie it to motivational theory, it really comes into that whole flexibility and autonomy, like working my way, me getting to choose how I do my work, my flex
Yeah.
hours. Like I think it that builds trust in people and it helps make them feel valued. So
Yeah.
like, I think there's a really positive link between remote work, hybrid work too, I guess, to a certain degree, and like inspiration and motivation. I think they tie together. But there's a dark side, there's a shadow side to it as well. And that is work life can become a blur for some
Yeah.
people.
Mm-hmm.
You're always on, like
Yeah.
you're just always on, right? I live in an apartment, so and I remote work all the time. And so at the end of the day, my husband's like, you need to leave the house. Like you
Yeah.
haven't left
Get
the
out.
house all day. You haven't left the house all week. You need to get out of the
Yeah.
house. And you can get in your own head about that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
I also think it can impact sense of belonging.
Mm-hmm.
and sense of belonging again is a huge motivator for a lot of people. But
Agreed.
I think there's ways to offset these things. I think there's things organizations can do to, fill the gaps.
Mm-hmm.
I think being really intentional. And again, this is the drag is it's more pressure on leaders. So leaders,
Right.
your job's already hard. Remote work, it's going to make it just a little bit harder now, because you need to be managing with enablement, autonomy, and empowerment. You do not want to be tracking mouse clicks. That's not going to inspire not going to inspire anybody. But it
No.
means you have to set very clear expectations, right? What is it that you expect your people to accomplish during the day?
Mm-hmm.
What does a SMART goal look like, right? Be really specific about the outcomes that you're expecting. And if you're clear about the outcomes and you're coaching people through them and then they win, they feel this tremendous sense of accomplishment, which when validated with rewards and recognition and like, hey, I'm affirming that you did the right thing, it just inspires people exponentially, right?
Yeah.
So very clear goal setting. Like people do not do
Yes.
well in ambiguity. They don't.
Right.
And how can you rate anybody's performance if it's subjective? Again,
Mm-hmm.
data, right? You need the data to validate your biases, right? Because we're full of bias, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, clear goal setting takes the subjectivity out of sense of accomplishment, and then
Right.
people can really feel that. So I think they also need to prioritize communication,
Mm-hmm.
like not like weird touchy feely micromanaging check-ins, but
Right.
like, hey, let's meet as a team and like share a meal together. I've had an organization, the organization I'm supporting right now. Whenever a new employee starts, and we're all remote, they send us each an Uber Eats voucher, and we all
Oh,
get
that's
our
great.
little whatever we want, and we hang out for an hour and welcome the person to the organization while we're eating. Like, it's so different,
I
right?
love
Like
it.
there's different ways to create community, right?
Uh-huh.
The thing to remember too is what becomes challenging if you have a high number of engineers or scientists in your
Right.
organization, there's like a preference for introversion.
Yeah.
So how do you find a way to engage introverts without doing this to them? Because right,
Yeah.
doing a lot of this can really suck the energy right out of them. So you've got to be
Yeah.
so maybe then camera off makes more sense.
Yeah.
Maybe then you're doing some kind of gamification so that
Mm-hmm.
it's not like draining the person. So you really got to know your people, I think,
Yes.
is the other thing that you need to think about. So it's not a one size fits all plan. We're all
Yeah.
different, and what inspires
Mm-hmm.
us is different. So that really falls on the leader to figure out like the differences for the people on their team, which is why I recommend that hopefully managers don't manage teams much bigger than 8 people, because it's really hard to do that
Right.
when the teams get bigger, right?
Agreed. Agreed. Yeah. I mean, I always felt that way as well as I was leading teams. And I mean, luckily I was never more than maybe six or so because I think it is important to get to kind of understand and know. And for me, it was always creatives. And so it was always, for me at least, it was really important to understand how they were intrinsically motivated
Yeah,
and how they were shaped and either motivated or demotivated by certain types of and ways of receiving feedback, because creatives, like, they're so sometimes precious about their work, and if they could shut you down, or be very resistant about like what they're receiving in the way of feedback, and it's like you really want them to be buying in and moving the work along based on what they're being given in the way of feedback, and sometimes it's just in the delivery that can make
yeah,
the difference. And I don't think people quite understand that little bit of extra time to get to know the individual and how they work and how they prefer, what their communication preferences are, how they like to receive feedback. Doesn't mean that you change the feedback. It's just the delivery, at the end of the
I think
day.
that's where leadership has changed so much, right? Like when I was younger,
Yeah.
your leader didn't give two craps about what
Right.
inspired you
Yeah.
or how you wanted to get recognition, or they would not even give you recognition. Like,
Right.
it's all crap. What is all this stuff you're talking
Uh-huh.
about? It's ridiculous. Like, just come to work, do your job, and get
Yeah.
paid. That's what work is all about.
Mm-hmm.
So it is funny that now it's almost like we need leaders to become psychologists, right?
Yeah.
They're coaches, they're
Coaches. I
therapists,
would agree
they're
with
parents.
coaches.
They're like, honestly, like
Mm-hmm.
we're
Yeah.
putting a lot on leaders, right?
We are. And I honestly would love to see that. I had that epiphany a while back of like, gosh, it would be so cool to do that. Like to just go and talk and tour around different companies and just talk about that and help coach middle managers to just become that coaches, like really understand, like you've done the job, you know the role, and you're not the one doing and executing anymore. You are the one leading and coaching them to that next phase. And it's like, if you're not a good coach, then you don't really belong in the leadership role. You should just still be doing the doing. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with staying in your craft and doing the doing.
And
Not
that's,
everybody should be a people leader.
yeah, and I'll tell you, it happens a lot, especially in tech. Like tech, you promote
Yes.
brilliance, right?
100%.
Technical people promote brilliance. And so these brilliant people who have always been individual contributors and rewarded
Yes.
for their brilliance and their hard work, now they're like, hey, do you want to be a leader? And they're like, I guess it's the next step on the career ladder. I guess I should
Right.
say yes. And then you throw them in this. It's like all, and now it's not about you at all. It's about everybody else. So I
Yes.
always think like in any organization, you should do like a precursor before you put anybody into leadership saying, so you think you can lead, and then being very like, your focus is going to shift from you to others. These are
Yep.
all the expectations we're going to have in you as a
Yeah.
leader. Are you sure you want to sign up for this?
Yeah.
Because like it's not for everybody,
Right.
right?
It's not. And I think too, the ways, like, you're talking about motivation, and I realize it's not like one of the intrinsic and it's more of the like external factors. But I think part of it is like you said, people who have these gifts and talents as like, say, a developer. This is a great example. My brother-in-law falls exactly into this. And I think I've shared this example before. Great, developer. He actually collaborates well with a lot of others too, which is, I can see why they thought maybe they should, give him a full team. But at the end of the day, like, he deals with a lot of other stress and anxiety in and outside of work, and he's just not a people leader. But it's like, okay, but they dangle a title and a salary in front of you. But then when you stay in your craft, oftentimes companies don't build what that extended career looks like. So then it looks
Yeah.
like, okay, the only way to move up or ahead is to kind of go into this place where I go outside of myself and my natural skills, talents, and abilities and get this other job that isn't me. So he took the job and the role, took the salary, took the pay rate or the promotion, didn't even make it 6 months, and just basically was like, take the money back, take the title back. I don't want any of it.
Although
Right?
I know it's a weird mind shift too. Like, and there's so much pressure. Like, I think like LinkedIn, I have a
Hmm.
love hate relationship with LinkedIn.
Yeah. All
But
of us.
because what happens on LinkedIn is like all this positioning, right?
Yes.
I'm making $1 million as an entrepreneur. Everybody quit your jobs and become an entrepreneur. Not every entrepreneur is going to make $1 million.
No.
Like, let's be real. And the promotions. Oh, I got a new title. I got a new title. I left this job and I got an extra $65,000. And
Yeah.
everybody just thinks that everybody's just careers are flying and they're
Killing it.
getting massive salaries and these big titles in like 5 minutes,
Yeah.
right? It's a really crazy, it's not like that. That's just not how it works.
No.
It's not that nobody's getting promoted, but nobody gets promoted that fast with those big salary increases. So
Yeah.
I think there's so much pressure on this generation to
Yes.
fall into that framework that they want to know what's my next step, what's my next step, where
Hmm.
it's like, okay, like if you really wanted to make a lot of money,
Hmm.
maybe you should have decided to be an investment banker, right?
Yes. There's
Like
other ways to
maybe
make
that might have
money.
suited your personality better than leadership, right? Like maybe this
Right.
wasn't the track you should have gone in at all, and maybe the next step in career progression is a completely different career, right? Because
Agreed.
if it's not leadership and you don't want that, right?
Hmm.
Like you got to check yourself a little bit too. Like,
Uh-huh.
and I think people got to own their own careers and stop expecting organizations to have these perfect little career paths for them. Because at some
Yes.
point, you're gonna hit a wall, right? I'm in a wall. Like I
Yes.
do this really weird nichey stuff. I'm an employee engagement culture expert. Like,
Yeah.
where do I get promoted? Right?
Yeah.
Like, where's my next
Yeah.
step? There's not one, right? Like, so if I don't like what I'm doing or what I'm earning at this state of my career, then I have to think about what kind of shift I want to make, right? And I think
Right.
and as leaders, I think you also have to manage the expectations of your people.
Hmm.
So sometimes their expectations are real and you can help them achieve their goals and you can
Right.
coach them up. And
Yes.
sometimes it's like, yeah, well, I want to be a VP in 2 weeks. It's like, okay,
Not
like
gonna happen, friend.
let's just have a chat about that. Like, you know what,
Right.
you can run a 5K. That doesn't make you a marathon runner the next day, right?
Hmm.
And then that doesn't make you a professional athlete. You need to
Yeah.
understand the steps to get to where
Hmm.
you need to go. And
Yeah. You.
so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry. You made so many good points there. So many good points, Kelly. I think it's such a good moment for those who are listening to really reflect as they kind of are looking to and moving into and through the leadership space. Is like, I had somebody ask me this, like, I've been that girl for since I was a kid, like natural born sort of leader, always kind of creating little groups and clubs. And, when there's ever like an occasion for somebody to just be kind of voluntold to do something as the leader, it's always me. And so she was like, Amy, do you even want to lead? And I was like, nobody's ever even asked me that, And so it's one of those things, like, I think it is always good to be asking yourself and being curious, because at the end of the day, I think understanding where your values lie and where you want to move ahead and move forward will help you make better, smarter choices, so that you don't end up in a place where you get to what you think you thought was what was going to make you happy, only to learn that you're not. So for me, it's like, yeah, an entrepreneurship, wonderful thing, amazingly fulfilling. I gave myself my title of, it's CEO, but it's Chief Empowerment Officer. And yeah, I'm no longer focused on climbing any particular ladder, because the ladder is mine. I am building it as I go. And yeah, I'm not like making the 6-figure salary I was as a creative director in advertising, but I'm serving a higher purpose. I'm leaving a legacy, because for me, those are bigger parts of my values,
Yeah.
and I'm leveraging all my gifts. But that's, it's different for everybody. And I agree with you, Kelly. Don't go down that rabbit hole of comparing yourself to everyone on LinkedIn or Instagram. Take some time and space for yourself
Comparison
and
is the
figure that
thief of
out.
joy, is
It
I think.
absolutely is.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then this will help you, I think, as well, right? As you understand this as an individual and you've done this work for yourself, maybe look to your team if you are a leader, and then help them work through that process. Because when you do have a new coming in 2 weeks and saying, I want to be VP of whatever, you can be, why? What is it about this role? So then you're helping guide them in a more authentic, value aligned way. So they're not kind of blindly going into this whole thing and sacrificing 14 years of their career chasing down maybe
exactly.
the wrong title and opportunity
Yeah, for the wrong reasons, right? Yeah.
for the wrong reasons, which leads to things like burnout, right? So it's a significant issue, obviously, within many an industry, including ours. And we know it obviously manifests very differently for everyone. So I'm kind of curious, outside of maybe these kinds of conversations, how could leaders become more attuned to the various signs of burnout within their teams? And what strategies do you recommend for addressing them in all the various forms that we see them?
I mean, the burnout is real, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like people are they're still tired from COVID, right?
Yeah.
Some people had some pretty big mental health fallout
Yep.
from the pandemic. I think we've got like the stress of a lot of companies are mandating their people back to the office. It's like
Yeah.
back we go, right?
Yeah.
That is, to me, like taking away something that is so coveted and privileged. To me,
Mm-hmm.
it's like saying to an employee, well, the market's really bad right now. So if you tried to leave, you'd get a lot less money. So I'm going to cut your salary by $30,000.
Yeah.
And how inspiring would that, how inspiring is that to an
How
employee? Right?
unmotivating is that?
Yeah, so you're taking away something that's really valuable to me.
Right.
Like that means like the reality is there's not that many remote companies, like
Yeah.
fully remote companies. I think I read there's like 15%. So it's not a
Okay.
lot. There was a lot
Yeah.
more before, but people are
Wow.
clawing back.
Yeah,
The
they are.
problem with that is they're going to pay for that decision
They are.
because in 10 years from now, everybody who can be remote will be
Will
remote
be.
because the workforce will demand it.
Yep.
But for now, people are burned out because their bosses are asking a lot more of them. There's all these layoffs, right? So
Mm-hmm.
people are laid off, so those people are stressed. And the
Yep.
people who are left behind are also stressed because A, they have survivor's guilt,
Yes.
and B, now they have a lot more work to do because there's less people to do the same amount of work. So people
Exactly.
are stressed there. There's the infinite amount of whatever is happening at home issues, children, caregivers, grief, cancer, divorce, like whatever your life is throwing at you. Like it is really stressful out there. I think like most people at one point in their life are going to need some kind of short-term disability leave for their mental health. I
Yeah.
think that's
Yeah.
stress leave is real. Like
It is.
it's happening.
Yeah.
And as a leader, like you can't do much about what's happening in someone's personal life, right? But you can
Mm-hmm.
be aware. So I think like a big thing for me is recognizing the signs of burnout means paying attention. And sometimes it's really obvious. It's like if you have an employee who was always really gung ho and now they're not gung ho, like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder what's going on with that, right? Or, they're getting increasingly negative or
Mm-hmm.
cynical or, all of a sudden they're taking more time off because they're getting, headaches or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
I think paying attention to those cues should be the first indicator that something's going on with your employee. What
Yeah.
can you do about it? You got to be careful about it because, like, again, you're not the therapist, right? You're not
Right.
there to solve their home problems or whatever. But at work, there are
Right.
things, very, very real things that you can do. So if you have established a relationship of trust with this employee, and hopefully all leaders have prioritized that. And building trust is like 3 podcasts of chats, right? But I mean, building trust is fundamental for a strong inspiring relationship. So if you've got the trust, then you be able to have those open conversations like, hey, I've noticed you've been blah, right? Is everything okay? And
Mm-hmm.
then hopefully the employee feels like they're, oh, I've just got so much going on. And then you can work with the employee. Everyone's an individual. Everyone's going to need something different. So it's like, okay, like, would you benefit from a couple of mental health days? Would that
Yes.
help? Maybe we can flex your hours so that, you have time to go to your son's baseball game or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think it's a matter of meeting the employee where they're at, figuring out what it is that can help them and seeing if you can enable that as much as
Yep.
you possibly can. Some things are going to be out of your control, but that might be the time where you do recommend a stress leave. Hey, like,
Mm-hmm.
we have short-term disability benefits. Go talk to your doctor. Take care of yourself. Your job
Yeah.
will be here, when you get
Yeah.
back. And it's prioritizing their mental health over your needs as a leader,
Mm-hmm.
right? That can be
Yeah.
hard to do.
Yeah, we got to call it that term for our U.S. listeners because you're in Canada, right, Kelly? So
Right.
like with that term here is not so as common as you would think. It's much more common in the UK and Canada. Stress leave is essentially yes, folks. You can apply, talk to your therapist, and get short-term disability leave for mental health. I first heard this. It wasn't until like probably 2010. And it was because we had been living in the UK and a friend of ours took
America's got
stress leave.
very different employment standards. I'm learning
Yes.
how
Yes.
fortunate we are
Yeah.
here, like parental leave. Like, we get 18
Oh
months.
God. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. We're lucky to get 6 weeks, if that.
I
It's ridiculous.
can't
It's
even.
sad. It's pathetic.
Yeah, no
That could be
severance
a
pay.
whole nother.
It's crazy down there. Come on up to
Yeah,
Canada.
whole nother conversation. I know, right? A whole nother conversation. Depending on how things go in November, it might be Kelly. But yeah, no, seriously, it is. It was mind boggling to me, right? Because he had been going through. He had like a history of some mental health issues, and they were kind of creeping up on him again. And I was talking to his wife, my friend at the time, and she's like, "Oh yeah, yeah, so and so, he's on stress leave." I was like, "Wait, what? What's this?" In 6 weeks. I'm like, "Wait." I didn't get that much time to go to have my baby. Stress
Yeah.
leave, tell me more. And she's like, well, he just got a note from his doctor and he's taking paid time off.
No, they
So,
don't get full pay time off. I shouldn't
right.
overplay it. Like,
True.
short-term disability is usually like half your pay or whatever. But
Right.
I mean, it's
It's still
usually enough
something
for a short-term period for you to sort of get your head together.
to take
What a
care of
lot of
yourself.
people, what a lot of people end up doing when they do their short-term disability is they're looking for other work because
Right.
often they realize like the source of their stress is actually their job,
Right.
right?
Their
And
job. Exactly. I mean, yeah,
as
that's
a
not
leader, you
surprising at
want
all.
what's best for your people, and if what's best for your people is for them to leave, then that's not a bad thing.
Right, because they're not probably being, they're not being as productive or contributing to their maximum because they aren't happy. And it's like, if you can't help that, control that, or change that, then yeah, let them go and find somebody who's going to be the right fit.
Absolutely.
And then also, yeah, I loved your note about how that stress can manifest physically. Sick days, headaches, migraines, other kind of undefined pain and things like that. Just being aware of how it shows up in your body is also important.
Yeah.
Um, all right, folks, keeping an eye on the chats. If you have questions, let us know. Kelly, could you share an example of a counterintuitive insight about motivation that often surprises you with your clients? That they're like, "This is how we motivate people," and you're like, "Facepalm."
Well, I think the first thing is that you can't motivate someone, right? Like, you
Aha.
cannot inject motivation into someone. Motivation comes from within, right?
Uh huh.
It's
I love
personal.
that.
It's deeply, deeply personal. And you can't, like, think about your kids. Do your homework. Yeah, good
Yeah.
luck. Is that you think you're really inspiring them, right?
Mm,
It's got to come. It's got to come from within. That said, as a leader in organizations, you can set the conditions that enable motivation, as we talked about: autonomy, mastery, purpose, all of those things. But you know, it'll empower people to tap into their own drive, but it doesn't guarantee that it will, because
yeah.
not like I know people,
Hmm.
purpose, autonomy, mastery, don't care. I go to work, I get a paycheck, I get a job.
Yeah.
I work to live, I don't live to work. And some people are
Yes.
just like, you can't
That's
assume
fine.
everyone's passionate and motivated and has dreams and
A hundred
desires,
percent.
right? And we have to respect that. So you can't make it happen, is what I'm saying.
Agreed. I love
Yeah.
it. That's great advice. That's a fantastic answer. I love it. Technology, obviously. I mean, I could throw in the word AI because it's like you can't not say the word AI in any conversation right now. But that's one concern, obviously, as people are kind of working through technology changes within a multitude of industries. But outside of just that, other technological changes, how can leaders keep their teams motivated and engaged when skills become outdated so quickly? I mean, in our industry in particular, it feels like every other day there's a new tool out there. So,
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to stay on top of it. I think like it's tough if you like there are a lot of employers out there who haven't kept up with their tech stacks.
mm-hmm.
And so you're like as long as you're there, and if they're not investing in growth development and they're not
Yeah.
changing their technology, your skills are going to become dead very quickly. So I think that's something to be mindful of. Like sometimes you don't think about it,
Yes.
right? Like, oh, wait a
Yep.
minute, I've spent 10 years with this organization. Now I'm completely and totally outskilled, right?
Yep.
So I think watch for that. I think
Yep.
the other thing is, organizations should be investing in people's growth and development. So having career
Yes.
conversations with people like, where do you want to grow? What do you like? Here's some skills you might need to develop to get into that next role. Let's work on an IDP or an individual development plan. So you
Yep.
set some goals, you set some objectives, and then you help people like grow those skills. I personally, AI,
Mm-hmm.
like I love AI.
Yeah.
I am like it has helped me write business plan. Like it is
Yeah.
so smart. Like I'm like if you know how to use a good prompt, AI can
Mm-hmm.
change your life. Like I
Yeah.
cannot believe the amount of hours it saves me. It's wild.
Absolutely.
And I think we can't imagine how it's going to change things for us in the next 20 years any more than when I was working at a record store in the 80s. Could I imagine that my music would be living on my phone, right? And be
Yeah.
free. Like what?
Yeah.
CDs were $35 at the time, and people were still buying vinyl singles for
Yeah.
$3. You can't imagine what the future is going to hold. So I think you need to like do your best to embrace
Agree.
it and not be afraid of it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, that I jotted down too when you were talking about personal and professional development. I love that job seekers ask that question. If you First of all, I'm just going to get on my like mini soapbox here and say when you're interviewing and you don't ask questions in return when they're at the end of the interview and say, "Do you have any questions?" You're like, "Nope, you've answered everything." For me, that's like a sorry, not hiring. I know that's really kind of harsh, but to
Yeah.
me, it's like you you didn't do homework on the company and you weren't, and if even if you did and we somehow answered everything, you weren't actively listening to
So many
anything.
things to dig into a culture, there's just so many things, like so many things
So
you should be
many
doing. The
things.
first thing you should be doing is checking out Glassdoor and seeing what the world has to say about this
Yes.
brand. And then you can use that to guide your interview. Hey, I read about blah, blah, blah on Glassdoor. What do you think of that?
Yeah.
Do you think that's accurate? What are you doing to combat blah,
Ooh,
blah,
I
blah?
like it.
Like
Get
those
him.
types. No, you don't want to be an asshole, right? Oops,
No,
sorry.
but I get to it. You're fine.
Yeah, because if you're like if you're like an antagonist in your interview, you're not going to get the job either, right? You
Be
want to come off
curious.
as
Be
intelligent.
curious. Yeah,
Yeah,
genuinely curious and say like, "Hey, listen, I saw these things and I've done that." Where it's like I knew the company culture was not totally in alignment with some of my like beliefs, let's say. And so
right.
I was like, okay, listen, I know this is kind of really where a lot of you all sit in your leadership, but how much does this actually trickle down into how you do the work and who
Exactly.
you do the work with? And I learned that that wasn't really the case. And I said, well, that's fine because I think from a moral standpoint, we're all still aligned. So it's good. But I also think like there's a freebie question. If you don't have a question, just one you can ask is like, do you have a budget for personal and professional development for your employees? You know,
Exactly.
it's such an important thing because I talk to so many women that come into Together Digital that are investing in themselves for networking, personal and professional development, which is fantastic because they have a safe space where they can kind of ask those questions and not feel like any shame or guilt. And they're not going to be judged for asking whatever they ask, and they can learn what they want to learn and not worry about somebody watching what they're learning, judging what they're learning.
You got to be careful
Um,
to make assumptions about companies too. Like I have a
mhm.
friend, like I think they changed it recently, but in Ontario there was like anybody who was working for any kind of Ontario government institution, they were
Uh-huh.
capped at a 1% pay raise for 3 years. So if you
Interesting.
walk in there and they give you whatever salary and your
Yeah.
expectation is every year you're going to get some kind of increase, and then you find out you're only ever going to get 1%.
Oh,
I
ouch.
wish I asked about that, right?
That, yeah, research, research, research. That's a great point. That's definitely worth a watch out. But yeah, I think just that having that opportunity, because when women come to us, oftentimes the thing I hear when I'm interviewing women coming to us and like why they found us and why they joined is like, I feel stuck. I feel stuck in my current job. I'm not moving ahead. And like you said, they don't have, any type of growth plan or, you know, relationship with the boss or manager that's giving them that next step within their career. They feel like they're spinning their wheels or they don't feel like they have a sense of direction or purpose, or they want to pivot into something different. And they're not being given that guidance or support. And so, yeah, I think finding that is important because I think it seems to be a big part of job satisfaction and motivation.
I think there's something to be said though about like when it comes to motivation, like I said, you can't motivate people. People
Right.
have to be motivated by themselves. So people who just kind of expect that their leader is going to like
Yes.
create and
Yes.
push it, like
Thank
here, we're
you.
just going to do this career path. Like you've got to take
Right.
ownership, right, of your own
Yes.
career.
Thank you.
Like you own your own career. And if you can't
100%.
do what you want to do in your organization, it's okay to say, I'm going to cut my losses and take it,
Yes.
go on my own. I think this is why I got so many entrepreneurs, right?
A
Coming over,
hundred percent.
getting frustrated with like the politics of work.
Yep. Yeah. No, thank you for bringing it back to that, Kelly. I 100% wholeheartedly agree. You have to own it. I think we've got an episode a ways back that we talked about being the CEO of your career and really looking at your career as like you are the CEO. Like you are the company, you are the CEO, and you own your career path and trajectory. Don't leave it in the hands of some company that you're going to work for 3 to 5 years, or maybe even less in most cases nowadays. You have to take ownership. I agree. I love that. Good point. Thanks
I'll
for
be
bringing it.
I'll be using that MEO. I love
Yeah,
it.
isn't it great? I
Yeah.
loved it. All right. Okay, we still got a few more minutes. I'm going to go through these two questions real quick, and then we'll see if we can get to our power round questions if we don't have any questions from our audience. At this point, we kind of all know that work-life balance is this unattainable myth, especially for women. We talked about the stats there, obviously, about work and home life. Could you share a little bit about how we could shift the conversation towards maybe work-life integration, and if there's any strategies that you've seen others use to navigate those blurred lines between personal and professional life while trying to stay motivated?
Yeah, and again, I think it's about ownership. I think this is about growth mindset. I think this is about
Mm-hmm.
us owning our lives and making the
Yes.
decisions that are smart for us. And
Mm-hmm.
so the first thing I would say is you need to set your priorities and you need to put in some boundaries to protect
Yes.
those priorities. So that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Like for me, making like I talked to you earlier, I'm an empty nester. I have time now. But
Yeah.
if I like when I want to prioritize something, I always put it in my calendar. So if I
Yes.
want to work out and I want to make an hour a day to get a workout, I put it in my calendar and I protect it. And
Yep.
everybody who knows me knows do not book a meeting
Yep.
over Kelly's workout. She'll say no,
Same.
right? So like it's about, you know, knowing what's important to you, prioritizing it, and cutting
Mm-hmm.
out the noise, right? And like people pleasers really have a hard time with that, but
Yeah.
like people pleasers need like if I was going to be developing something as a people pleaser, I'd be learning not
Right.
to please people so much
Right.
because
Well, is it?
it creates more pressure on in an
Yes.
already very crazy chaotic existence. It just creates that much more, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, and I also think like I can't reinforce the concept of movement enough. Like you don't need to
Mm-hmm.
go to the gym, you don't need to lift heavy weights, but move. Like if you sit behind your computer for 8 hours a day and then you go and you hang out with your kids and you haven't like taken a break or gone for a walk, like it's going to impact everything. Like
Yeah.
that little bit of investment in yourself, even if you're like doing a talking conference call. I've seen more people do that.
Right.
I'm on calls and people are
Yeah.
walking. Well, that's weird.
Oh, yeah.
Like, well, I guess we can. We're just having a chat. We're not like it's not
Yeah.
a training session or something, right? So
Yeah.
don't be afraid to do things that are a little bit out of the box. Take care of
Yeah.
yourself.
Change it up. No, and I wholeheartedly again agree with you about boundaries. And for those of you who do struggle with people pleasing, just understand that there's a flip side. Boundaries for you benefits everybody. When you create boundaries for yourself, you can actually show up better for others because you've taken time for yourself to relax. And so if you're worried about letting other people down, keep saying yes and then watch yourself fizzle and burn out and then let everybody down because you are so burnt out and unable to deliver and honor your commitments because you've overcommitted yourself. And also, I've learned that by creating my boundaries and also like saying no to certain things forces some people within my family to have to show up and be competent and learn that they are competent and they don't need me for everything. So there's like a win-win for everyone when you hold your boundaries, friends. All right, we're at the last minute. I'm going to go ahead and just jump into our power round questions.
Okay.
So, Kelly, in one word, what is the biggest motivator for most employees?
Winning.
Winning. I like it. Fill in the blank. The thing that every leader should do daily to motivate their team is?
Make them feel valued.
I love it. I gotta agree. What is the most overrated perk that companies think motivates employees but actually doesn't?
And I know you're going to think I say ping pong table, but I'm going to say unlimited vacation.
Oh, I talked to a guy a while back who told me they did unlimited vacation and then they started just offering to pay people to go on vacation because it was that bad. They wouldn't even take it then. It's so
Yeah,
bad.
there's a million reasons on the like done well, it can be great, but very few companies do it well, and it's
Yeah.
become it. Yeah, it can be
Interesting.
maybe a challenge. It seems like
All
the cool new
right.
thing. It's not cool. Yeah,
Last one then. If you could magically instill one habit in every leader to improve motivation, what would it be?
active listening.
Love it. This was great, Kelly. Thank you so much. I hope everybody else walks away with some great new inspiration and ways in which they can start to work with and hopefully understand the intrinsic motivators of their team members so that they can start to find motivations within themselves, right? To start to work better and harder and find that sense of purpose and satisfaction in the work that they do. Thank you, Kelly, so much for all of your work and for joining us for the hour.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you to all of our live listeners. We love having you here with us. We hope to see you all again next week as we are talking to who are we talking to next week? Let's see. I'm looking at my schedule and I'm not seeing on my notes. I think we just scheduled somebody last minute. So I will. Oh, we're talking to Pam. We're talking to Pam. We're going to be talking about my good friend Pam. She is a marketer who has just written some really great, short, quick, easy, digestive books on AI for marketers that you can like kind of be like multitasking and looking at her books and then testing out some of these prompts and tools for marketers. So we will members will share out the links to those books for so you can check them out if you want to take a look at them before we talk to her on Friday. But Pam will be with us next week in the Power Lounge, so I hope to see you all then. Everyone, until then, keep asking, keep giving, and keep growing. We'll see you then. Bye.
Produced by Heartcast Media.